The planet is restless, Captain. They want their podcast, and they shall have it. I'll beam down to the surface. You have the bridge. Captain, that is illogical. These are Trek fans. They will challenge and dissect your knowledge with great emotion. It is a mission fraught with danger, peril, and grave risk. Suggestions? Send in the red shirts.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Red Shirts. We are back. We are back with a podcast that is just so big, so grand, so great that it measures, my God, 82 AU in diameter.
That's pretty big.
That's big. So let's just get right to it. I've got my number one and I've got my con here with me. Now, which one of you is at the con? Which one wants to be number one?
Didn't we figure this out earlier?
Yeah, Q, you're the captain. You make the call, man.
I'm not getting in the middle of that. So let's just say one of my commanders is Mr. Craig Johnston. Craig, how are you today?
I'm good, but you realize we red shirts, right? So we're the lowest of the low. We don't command the ship, that's for sure.
No. See, I like to think of us as the next generation iteration where Captain Picard and Riker, they wore red shirts.
Okay.
Now,
Make it so.
Exactly. Big Sexy, how are you doing today?
I'm sitting here watching football. Got a ton of rain coming down. I'm digging it.
Wait, I thought it never rained in Southern California.
I wouldn't know because I'm in Northern California.
Oh. Okay. All right. Well, this show's off to a cracking start. So we're going to get right into this. We're talking about Star Trek: The Motion Picture, a picture that was fraught with a lot of mishaps and delays and production issues. Basically, when the original series ended in 1969, due to being canceled, imagine that. It achieved cult status and syndication, and the great bird of the galaxy, Gene Roddenberry, decided he wanted to do a film, and Paramount was game, but no scripts were produced that they felt confident in. As a matter of fact, and I may, if I have my history wrong, please correct me. It was around this time that Roddenberry had written a script called The God Thing, and it didn't pass muster, so the film was scrapped, and they decided, well, let's just try to strike gold where we struck it before on TV, and they went back to production on a different iteration of Star Trek called Star Trek Phase 2, but that became mired in production delays, and they couldn't find the right stories, and so on and so forth. So around this time, and they approached some pretty well-known sci-fi writers like Bradbury. I want to say Arthur C. Clarke. I could be wrong about that. But so then they said, okay, let's try to do a film again, because they were looking at the success of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and we all know the other blockbuster behemoth that came out around that time.
Boo.
I want you to say it, Big Sexy.
Star Wars.
Yes, that's right, Star Wars. So it just seemed natural that Star Trek would have something to put on screen. So they tried it again. They came up with a pilot, a script called, if I'm not mistaken, it was called Star Trek: Planet of the Titans. And the basic storyline was, it was a time travel story where Kirk and crew go back in time to a planet where they meet what we know in Greek mythology as the Titans, and they accidentally end up teaching the Titans how to create fire. So, I don't know. I'm horrible at reading scripts because all scripts really sound bad to me. That sounds like a horrible story to me, but it got greenlit. However, production got delayed again, so they put it on the shelf, and eventually they came up with the script that we know nowadays as the motion picture. They approached Spielberg, they approached Coppola to direct it, but for whatever reason, they settled on Robert Wise, which I think some people would say is a rather interesting choice. Now, Robert Wise was an award-winning director. I believe he had won 2 Academy Awards.
Didn't he do West Side Story?
He did West Side Story, and I believe he won the award for that. This is all my quick scanning of information, because this movie has such a storied past. But for whatever reason, they went with Robert Wise, and the rest is history. Now, it began filming in 1977, I believe. Let's see. Look at my notes here. Yeah. Filming
78.
in August 7th, 1978, 6 days after my birthday. Of course, I was born way before 78, but I won't tell you how long ago. And it premiered December 7th, 1979. That does not sound right.
Why not?
Only in a year they got this thing done. Let's see.
Yeah.
And
there are a lot of post-production they had to do for it too, though.
Right. It took the average Star Wars film 3 years.
Star Wars had money.
And it received mixed reviews from critics. And I'm going to read a quote from Wikipedia. Received mixed reviews from critics, many of whom faulted the film for its lack of action and over-reliance on special effects.
Yeah, I can see that.
They ain't lying. There was a definite lack of action. The final production cost ballooned to approximately $46 million, and I believe the initial budget was $15 million. Now, just to put that in perspective, Star Wars cost $7 million to make. The film earned $139 million worldwide, which I assume for that time period was pretty good, but still fell short of studio expectations, but enough for Paramount to propose a cheaper sequel. And I love that, a cheaper sequel, because we all know the sequel pretty much set the tone, but we're going to save that for a future show. So there you have it. That's just the just kind of like a thumbnail sketch of Star Trek the Motion Picture. One thing I found interesting in doing research was that, and I do kind of remember this, one of the lead actors in this film was an unknown Indian model named Persis Kambata. And I, as a kid, I was around 10 or 11, 9 or 10 when this came out. Of course, I had no idea who she was. I just knew even then, at that young of an age, she was fine. But I never knew she was Indian. So she was approached for the role, and initially she had no qualms about shaving her head because, as we all know, she is Deltan, and I guess Deltans have bald heads.
Oh, yeah.
She had no problem shaving her head, but after she got into it, she was concerned that her hair wouldn't grow back properly, so she started taking medication and balms and salves and stuff like that on her scalp, just to make sure her hair would grow back, which it did, but she decided to keep it cut short. Now, unfortunately, Ms. Kambata passed away recently. I want to say in 1999. She had a sudden heart attack.
I did not know that. So
that is sad to hear. But I did not know much about it. Did not know she was Indian. But boy, it's a shame because I know that she did create a stir. I do remember she created a stir for being being considered a very sexy person to appear bald in a major motion picture, and she kind of created what do you want to say, like a niche audience, or she kind of, I guess you could say she brought bald into vogue. So I do recall she appeared on a number of different publications and posters and things of that nature. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out that well for her for a film career, but she went on to do a lot of TV. So I guess I want to say good for her. So let's just get right into it, jump right into it. And I want to start with the positive, what I think is going to be a positive aspect of this movie. I want to get a positive take on it from Craig. Craig, can you tell us what your earliest memories are? Or do you remember going to see Star Trek, the motion picture, and what do you recall of that?
I do remember going to see it. For some reason, I was too young, obviously. My mother took us to the drive-in. I'm sure
Wow, the drive-in.
people are
Okay.
scratching their heads. Well, drive-in, yeah. You got this piece of crap speed hanging on your window in your car, and the elements are interfering with the experience. So for me, it wasn't great. That's what I remember. It wasn't great, but it was the environment, I think. So when I watched it later in life, and again I watched it again yesterday, the one negative I'd say it's too slow, and yes, there's no action, but the story, the concept of the story, and the way that they run with the story is a good one. It's great. I think Vija looking for its master and collecting knowledge to pass on to him is an interesting story. That it's got that going for it, and also the special effects are pretty good for 1979.
All right. So now, Big Sexy. Okay,
Yep.
I'm just gonna say, let's brace for impact, folks. Shields up. Big Sexy. Tell us your early memories of, or what you remember about Star Trek the Motion Picture when you went to see it.
Early memories. I'm a few years older than you, Q. I don't know about you, Craig, but I remember when this came out, and to me, uh, down in the San Francisco Bay Area where I was growing up, Star Trek was huge in syndication, and then they did the cartoon in 1976, from Filmation, which I loved, and then Star Wars came out, went bananas, and it appeared to me that this was positioned as a response to Star Wars as kind of a money grab. So I was a little negative going in. And then I saw it and I'm like, this is terrible. It was like a giant, let's get the band back together, whack off fest. I didn't care for it. Nothing happened. Nothing. And they used the captain of the ship at the time was Decker. And for us old diehard Trek fans, I think of the Commander Decker in that episode from the original series that he destroyed another ship. So when I hear Decker, I think that guy. And so they went ahead and did what they did there, and they introduced the new character, and then the costumes or the uniforms. Our show is called Red Shirts. Did anyone see a red shirt in that film? I didn't.
Well,
It just didn't look right.
we're going to save the critique for. I just want to, man, my man, you're already lobbing photon torpedoes, bro. I'm just trying to get your, the theater, the atmosphere. Where you were on a date. Well, I guess you weren't on a date, but
Whoa.
well, we were too young. I'm assuming you were around 10 or 11.
I was 14, 15.
Okay. What was her name? All right, yeah. Okay. But do you recall any memories?
Yeah,
Fond
I remember
memories?
seeing it at the Grand Lake Theater in Oakland, and remember being. I wouldn't say it was bad. I think time has really been unkind to it, but it was a lot of where's the action? Let's go. We see Klingons in the beginning, and then there's no throwdown. There's no nothing. I didn't. It was a lot very underwhelming. That's the word I'd use.
Okay.
Especially in light of Star Wars, which had a lot of things cooking in it.
Well, all right, and let me just say, I don't remember exactly what theater I went to see this in, but we kind of touched on this while I went on it at length about this. I did not know much about Star Trek at all. I knew about the characters vaguely. I think through the cartoon. I didn't watch the show, but I did not watch the show. I did not watch the show. We're going back to, let's see, this came out in 79, so I would have been 79. I guess it would have been 12 or 13, 11, 12, 13, something like that. So we had just come off of Star Wars, which came out in 77, and I was hyped from that. So I was like, okay, let me give this Star Trek a chance. And so I knew nothing going in, and it's just it's so incredible to believe that when we see those Klingons with the ridges on their forehead, I had no point of context. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know anything what was going on. I didn't know Enterprise, Enterprise, who's this guy who's walking around here like he's in charge? Oh, that's Kirk? Okay, Kirk, that sounds familiar. I had no clue about these characters. And so for me, it was torture. It was, all right, look, guys, I may not know a lot about Star Trek, but this is supposed to be a sci-fi film. I just saw Star Wars a couple years ago. What are you guys doing? I remember clearly when they go over that V'ger, they do the V'ger flyover where Kirk says, take us within 500 meters. And everybody looks at him like, Captain? What? 500 meters? 500 meters, Sulu. I'm like, and they go over the whole surface and you see these globes and you see this and you see the arches. And at that point I'm thinking, okay, is he in that window? Is V'ger inside that window? What is he going to pop out or something? So I was thinking that it's going to be V'ger was some corny Stan Lee Marvel Comics villain, like Guard. You know what I'm talking about, Big Sexy, or like some big metallic, big badass warrior. So I'm like, when are we going to see this guy? I left that theater thinking I'm never going to, Star Trek is dead to me. Because to your point, there really was no action at all. I don't think one single phaser was fired.
Nope.
I think we saw a photon torpedo when they get caught in the wormhole. Other than that, there's no battle. There's no fight. There's no real conflict other than V'ger's going to destroy the Earth, and we don't know what V'ger is. And the whole story is basically about them. This isn't the main theme, but the story, the narrative, the action is about them trying to determine who V'ger is and how to stop him. That's pretty much it. So now, having said that, let's move into, and Big Sexy, you kind of touched on this, so I'm going to go back to Craig. Well, no, I'm going to stay with you, Big Sexy. Looking at this film today, tell me, what do you think went wrong with this movie? Let's get into detail about it, because we kind of touched on it. What do you think went wrong, and what could they have done? What was missing, and what should have happened to make this film much better?
Well, I think what went wrong is I think it was more of a response to the success of Star Wars and Close Encounters instead of someone coming along organically and saying, look, let's go ahead and restart this and build it back up. So to me, the whole production seemed rushed, which means there was no story at all. They should have taken more time, built the story up. I mean, they got the cast back, which was great, and they got them all, but the story was not there. Then to complicate things, the costumes design was just terrible. And when you have situations like that, when you take a television property and put it on the big screen, a lot of times people will add elements just because it's on the big screen, and those elements will detract from the original show, which is what exactly happened here. They got away from the show, tried to do too much, make it too big, way too many special effects for a movie that nothing happened in. No, and the little one dude flying around outside in space, what was his purpose?
I love that dude.
That dude didn't do shit.
You're talking about when V'ger electrifies the Epsilon 9 space station, right?
Yes, and he was there at the beginning too, and he just whipping around. Like, why are you here, man?
Big Sexy, he was effecting repairs on an antenna on outside of the station.
Then we should have talked to him. Okay.
Well, you know what's funny? Did you notice? I see it every time now. When there's a shot, the camera's static, but you see the electric bolts coming towards the lens as it encompasses the space station, and that guy is coming towards the lens, and right before he gets to the lens, you can tell he falls off of the track.
He stumbles, yeah.
That poor sap.
That yesterday, I'm like, what happened to my man here, man?
You know what? One thing I wanted to say before we get too off the topic is that when we watch Star Trek the Motion Picture now, post-generation, I think we see the seeds of the next generation in there. We also hear them too. The music that was composed for the Star Trek the motion picture was note for note used for Next Generation. So the funny thing is when you watch that now, your mind keeps jumping to the Next Generation because they're playing this music which now everybody associates with TNG. The other thing is Margil Barrett, who was Nurse Chapel, is now Dr. Chapel. And when she speaks in the motion picture, she sounds just like the computer, which is the part she plays in the Next Generation. But the way that she speaks, it's exactly the same. So every time I heard Margil Barrett speaking, I thought it was the Next Generation the computer was speaking. My mind just made that jump. And then the third thing I noticed was some of the set pieces for the corridors looks like just covered them in a different plastic for the Next Generation ship. So just a weird thing, very weird for me to watch it and get these flashbacks to the Next Generation, even though it's flash forwards really to the Next Generation.
Well, and kind of on that point, I watched it just yesterday. I mean, it's not the first time I'd seen the film, but I think I'm going to say Star Trek: The Motion Picture. This film, as far as I'm concerned, this film kind of sets as a production bible or a template for everything that we see to come. Sets the template for what we see in Trek lore post the motion picture. For example, you see the design of the decks. You know, when you think about the original series, they were pretty much just, you know, walls that were curved, that were arced. But here, these decks, they had segments, and they had like the geometric segments to the walkways. You think about the engineering, that warp core that we know and love from Next Generation, from Voyager, from DS9, that was a space station, but it seems like I think I'm forgetting something. But the vertical warp core with the tubules that have the dilithium chamber within. Although in this movie there's no color whatsoever, whereas with Next Generation and Voyager, you saw a lot of color. So you do see a lot of elements here that you will recognize in further iterations of Star Trek. I think even the bridge, this bridge was a circular bridge, and I don't remember the original series. I don't think it was necessarily a circular bridge. Am I wrong about that?
No, it's definitely circular.
Was it circular? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the episodes, they pan the camera into the top window, if you remember correctly.
Ah, yes. Okay. Well, and speaking of that, I think it wasn't until Next Generation that we saw a dramatic change in the bridge, where the rear consoles, there were people that are standing facing forward towards the view screen, as opposed to the motion picture and the original series. But no, you're right. You're absolutely right. Craig, what do you think? Was that your response to things that you thought made the film bad, or what do you think went wrong with this picture?
No, not necessarily. I just wanted to make that comment because I just watched it now again just to make sure I was up to speed on it. You know, and I can see what they were trying to do with the costumes, because the original series had that cloth kind of thing going on. It was just really cheap material, and so the new quote unquote new costumes in the motion picture were also just cloth, whereas in the Next Generation, the rest of the movies, they were much more. There was much more fabric to it, and they looked much more upmarket, you could say. So I could see what they were iterating the costume from the original series. It just didn't look that good. I don't believe we saw any phases, which was annoying. We didn't see any communicators at all. They just left it. They were wearing Apple Watches.
Oh, you're right.
That's what they were wearing. They kept talking into their wrists. Yeah,
wait, when Kirk is at when they are at, and listen, they're going to be spoilers because the movie's freaking how old now? But at the end, where they are in the V'ger amphitheater, and Kirk calls to the ship and says, "Dial up all of the command codes for Voyager 6." Isn't he talking in a communicator, or was he talking in a watch then?
I think he was talking to his wrist.
He was talking to his watch.
Was he really?
To the Apple Watch.
Yet another thing that Star Trek came up with. Well,
I'm surprised that, the stewards Shatner, Nimoy, these guys wouldn't have said, no, we can't do that. What are you, crazy? We use communicators.
Wait, hold on. These guys were just lucky to be working again, especially on the big screen. This was before T.J. Hooker, and Nimoy wasn't doing much, and they were happy to be out there.
Well, I will say that in my research, that is illogical, because Robert Wise, and as we all know, I don't know why they do this. He had no prior knowledge of Star Trek before getting this job. And he consulted a lot with, he turned to Shatner to help him determine how would this go, or how would this character behave in this situation, or how would this happen. So he did look to Shatner, and I assume Nimoy and DeForest Kelley for advice. So it seems like those guys would have said, we can't really, if we're going to do this, we can't really change.
But again, keep in mind, that was 11 years previously, too.
I understand, but if you're going to respect the fact that Shatner was on the original series, and you're going to look to him because you don't know anything about Star Trek, I would think that would be part of them saying, hey, where are my communicators at,
And the other thing I thought was silly was, if you were remembering back to the original series, by 1969, the main three characters had built a lovely rapport with each other. And then you see Kirk show up, and he's just being an asshole to everybody. Like, what is up with that? With his buddy, like shit. I mean, I didn't understand that. I just didn't get it. He was he was too aggressive. He wasn't Captain Kirk. He was a much more aggressive Captain Kirk.
Well, let me go ahead, Big
Well,
Sam.
to follow up on what Craig said, I agree with that, because at the very last scene, Kirk says, he picks the directions of, engage he's all that away. That away? Really?
Well, that's...
No.
Come on.
No.
That's a complaint.
No. Yes.
What does he say? What does he say at the end of Undiscovered Country? He gives you a J.M. Barrie quote. He says, "First star to the right and on till dawn," or something like that.
Yeah, he does.
Comes out of Peter Pan.
Okay,
Yeah, that's just the explorer aspect of it. That's all.
But you know what I mean, Mike, about the Captain Kirk sort of being nasty to his buddies. Right? I mean,
yes.
He wasn't friendly with him at all.
Well, let me just say this, and then I'm going to give my take on it. Do you remember the scene where Spock comes on to let me back up. I don't know if I'm going to agree with you completely, Craig, because and as I was saying, when Spock comes on, Kirk brightens up. Spock, and Spock gives him that cold shoulder. And then when Bones comes on board, he says, "Bones, there's a thing out there. I need you, Bones." He's very warm and effusive to the crew, wouldn't you say?
It's like Sulu and Chekhov, and I don't know. He just seemed off to me.
They're just ensigns. What does he get?
But he spent 5 years on with them. I mean,
Well, here's what I think the problems were. I think that, and I want to say, I remember reading this. I don't know if Roger Ebert was the one who said this, but some critics said, and I didn't understand what they meant at the time because I didn't know Star Trek, but they said that from 69 to 77, which is, what's that, 18 years? 8 years? God, my math's horrible. 8 years? The characters were not allowed to grow. They weren't allowed to age. It was as if, even though I believe only 5 years takes place between the end of the 5-year mission on original series to the beginning of this film. It's only 5 years. But for us, the audience, it had been more than 5 years. It had been almost, people had been waiting for this for what seemed like eons, okay? So I think rightfully, to this critic's point, you can't just put these characters in the same mix as though no time has passed. And I think that's what to your point, Craig, even though I was giving you examples of where Kirk was kind of, nostalgic for his crew, I know where you're coming from. He does seem pretty stern. There's no like, hey, how are you? Hey, how you doing, man? None of that. And I think that's a flaw in this film, which was completely made up for in Star Trek II. You got it then. But here, you don't get that sense of, my God, it's so good to be working with you again. You don't feel that. And I think you're right to that extent. I think
even Spock, though. I mean, Spock was also acting weird. I mean, he's just spent 5 years on the Enterprise with all these people. He's very close to Kirk, and he comes on the ship and he just barely acknowledges him. That just didn't make any sense. He was much too aloof.
That was motivated, I think. I'm not going to say this makes sense, but that was motivated by, apparently at the beginning of this film, he's on Vulcan and he's undergoing Kolinar, where it's the final phase of purging all emotions.
Sure.
And he fails it, right? So when he gets on the ship, I see that as, you know what? I've got to be resolute in my resolve to not show emotion. I failed the Kolinar, so okay, I've got to work on this. And so it's like him reacting to his failure. I can't allow my emotions to come through.
Fair enough.
But
that makes sense.
But to the converse, if you watch the original series, which at this point I've seen all of those episodes, I don't know how many times, I never see a Spock that needs to undergo Kolinar. He seems pretty in control of his emotions throughout the series, unless he's being manipulated or something to that effect. Would you agree?
I think so, but I think on the show he every now and again he lets emotion through accidentally. So, yeah.
When he thought that he had killed Kirk.
Yes, Amok Time.
Upon fire. Yeah.
Amok Time, yes.
And Kirk came back. He was the big smile, And again, people seem to forget Spock is half human.
Yes.
So for him to purge emotions completely may be something he just can't do. And then if you look at Spock there, and I just saw this the other day on BBC America, you look at him in either the Menagerie or the pilot episode, he was a lot more emotional then, too, the way he would deliver his lines.
Well, and the other question I have is, after Spock does his spacewalk and he comes back, and he's in the sick bay, he seems to be smiling and almost tearing up when he's talking to Kirk. And that didn't make any sense to me either. Now, is that a moment where we see the character saying, look, I am who I am. I can't deny who I am. So he starts to kind of soften. You remember he's laying in bed and he's talking to Jim, and he's like, Jim, this is something that V'ger can't experience. And he shakes Kirk's hand and he starts to smile a little bit. What do you make of that?
I think you hit it right on the head, actually. Because he's acknowledging that he does have these emotions, and they're not going anywhere, to an extent.
But I don't think,
and that V'ger can't understand or express that.
And that's my take on it. And I think at that point, because at the end, Scotty says, we can have you back on Vulcan in 3 days, Spock. And he's like, no, I'm good. I'm going to stay. I think it's that sickbay scene where he makes that determination. It's just, it seems that scene seemed out of character for all of the original series where we see Spock. Because he, like you said, unless it was a surprise moment, he never smiled, acknowledged any kind of human emotion for the most part. So I thought that was a little weird. But I want to go into a little bit more detail about why I think it was what went wrong with the film. And I think, to me, I sum it up with, Robert Wise, again, as I mentioned, he had no prior knowledge to Star Trek. And I think that's always a mistake. I really do. I'm sure there are examples of directors who didn't know the source material and still knocked it out of the park. I can't think of any right off the top of my head.
I can't think of one.
Yeah, I can't.
Directors who have that kind of hubris just annoy the shit out of me.
Right. So I think what Robert Wise saw was he he saw a narrative that was set in space, a lot of spaceships, a lot of cerebral narrative, and he immediately latched on to 2001: A Space Odyssey. I don't think he took the time to look at the original shows and syndication, because that film, the Star Trek film, it just has the tone of 2001, where, now I can't remember when 2001 came out, but all of those effects, just seeing a spaceship in space, that was enough to sell the film, I believe. But when you in a post-Star Wars world, you cannot spend 5 minutes getting Captain Kirk from the Starbase to the Enterprise. You can't you can't spend nearly 10 minutes flying over your special effect of V'ger, the V'ger craft. So I think he was given a Star Trek property. He didn't know what he was doing with it, and he just gave it a 2001 tonality, which I think was a problem.
I think you're right.
One of you mentioned the costumes. Again, I think now I will say, backing up, to Robert Wise's credit, to his defense, he says that the film he delivered, and they did deliver this film right up to the last minute for his preview. He says that it wasn't the film he wanted to cut. It wasn't the cut that he wanted. Now, I don't know what he means by that, because, in today's world of DVDs and, Criterion collections, it seems like he could have done what he wanted to do, or his estate could have done that. They did it with Richard Donner and Superman 2. Okay, that's something else. But in terms of the costumes, this is going to be the first time that we get the ever-changing Starfleet uniform. Okay? And I will say that it was William Ware Theiss, or Tice, I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. He was responsible for the costumes in the original series. He was too busy to design costumes for the movie, so they hired a guy named Robert Fletcher. And Big Sexy, to your point, it's like all these new cats come on and have to put their stamp on it. He thought the primary colors would not work on screen.
Oh, God.
And it looks like what he did was he, again, got the script and said, oh, this is sci-fi? Well, what's popping off in sci-fi today? Oh, Logan's Run. What are they wearing?
That's what it looked like.
What are they wearing?
Oh, that's exactly right.
They're wearing shirts. They're wearing, casual shirts. And all the muted color, I don't know. I mean, film is film, whether it's digital, I don't care. I could be wrong. I work in film and digital. Maybe I'm wrong still. Film is film, digital is digital, but it's all a medium. And film has a lot of latitude. So I don't know why you would choose to dress your actors in the most muted colors possible. Gray and white. So I don't get that. I don't understand does anyone know what those things were that were on their waists in front of they look like little pocket calculators at their belts?
Oh, man, that was so bad.
What were those?
I got no idea.
Yeah, I don't know what those are either. That I try to figure it out while I was watching again now, and it looks like some kind of computer equipment that they never use in the movie, but that's
they never use it. And the thing I like the most when Bones gets beamed aboard in his casual wear, he looks like a retired porn actor. He's got that same material. I want to quote here. Robert Fletcher was selected to design the new uniform, suits, and robes for the production. Fletcher eschewed man-made synthetics for natural materials, finding that these fabrics sewed better and lasted longer. So he sounds like a cheap bastard to begin with.
Yeah, he does.
And the other thing is, they did away with the skirts. He says that they did away with skirts like they had in the original series because it would be considered sexist, which is interesting, even for the late 70s, that they were concerned about that. But when you see them in Starfleet Academy, there are women wearing skirts. So it's just very interesting. So yeah, there were a lot of problems. Just some other things I want to touch on real quick. What do you guys think? I've read that that Ilea and Decker were the inspirations for Riker and Deanna Troi. Do you guys have any information on that?
I can see that. Yeah, I can see. I don't have any confirmation, but I can see it. And
But
the funny thing is, when Ilea came on the ship, the first thing she said was, "Yes, I've been celibate the whole time." I'm like, really? Just letting you know that y'all ain't getting none.
well, and that's the interesting thing. If you remember, when Uhura tells the captain that Ali is coming aboard, and there's a dramatic beat, and she says, "Captain, she's Deltan," and everyone turns, and there's a tight shot on everyone's eyes when she walks. And so I was thinking, because I had forgotten, maybe Delta is like Rigel 7, the pleasure planet. But no, then she says, "I'm celibate."
Yeah, I was going to say a comment about that.
So
It
do you
seemed out
guys?
of place.
Do you think that maybe Delta is kind of like a sexually nihilistic planet, and so that made it all the more striking when she says she's celibate? I'm trying to make sense of why everyone was so enamored of her when she walked on the bridge.
I think that's it because I don't remember Rigel 7 being that promiscuous. I'm thinking more like Risa in the later years.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
But and if that's the case, and she's one of those planet's inhabitants, I'm sure the fella's like, "What's up?" And then the first thing she walks in and says, "Look, I'm celibate. Y'all can put it away." So I'm sure there was a little bit of disappointment until Decker sees her and is like, "What's up, baby? How you been?" "Oh, how you been?" And because they clearly have a history.
Well, here's an important question. Do you think that Decker hit that?
Oh, Decker hit that. Decker hit all that.
But I mean, she said she was. So
Oh, that's right.
once they merged and went to wherever they went to.
That's
You
true.
really had to take that risk.
That's true. Some other things that I noticed, and I really want you guys to please just jump in, okay? I'm just going to run down a list of things that I noticed that I thought were interesting. I thought it was interesting that, in today's Trek, and when I say today's Trek, I'm talking about from Next Generation forward. I guess at some point the producers said that the proper quote when a Vulcan wants to mind meld is "our minds as one, our thoughts as one," because Tuvok is saying that all the time in Voyager, whereas here when Spock tries to mind meld, which I think was a foolish thing to do, tries to mind meld with the orb on Ilea's neck, he says "our minds together," which I just thought was interesting, very different. Did you guys notice anything, any kind of inconsistencies like that?
I think that in the original series, Spock did not say anything when he mind melded, and so maybe that was the first thing they came up with for the movie, and then they made it sound a bit better in the Next Generation, and so
I remember
on.
an episode of the cartoon. He melded with something else externally, and he just kept saying, "Listen to me, listen to me."
But you bring up a good. Well, you know what? I'm going to save that for later. But you bring up something I want to come back to. But another thing I noticed was that Kirk, when they first launch from the dry dock, space dock, Kirk says he calls for impulse power, and then he says, "Mr. Sulu, warp 0.5," which what I know of Star Trek today is completely wrong. Thoughts?
I did catch that as well, and it did sound a little bit out of place because when he said 0.5, I thought, did he say 5? 0.5? The hell? Now, granted, I have seen it other times where people don't want to be whipping around in warp near, planetary atmosphere. So that I can understand, but I've never heard the increment 0.5 before.
And also,
Yeah, I mean, I caught that as well. I think it's maybe it means that the impulse engines can go to close to warp 1, take the ship close to warp 1, and only when you engage the warp drive can you go from warp 1 up. That's the way it seems when you're watching the movie.
is there any precedent, which I can't remember right off the top of my head, any precedent in the original series where I don't remember him calling for impulse engines. I just remember him always calling for thrusters, which I'm going to assume are impulse engines, but I don't remember him ever giving a warp factor below 1.
Nor do I. I think, but I've heard thrusters more for maneuvering thrusters too, not necessarily as like a slower speed than impulse. I think thrusters are
Well,
really more for just parking and getting out of space.
yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. Like if you and Big Sexy, you pointed this out to me. Maybe because in the vacuum of space, there's really no such thing as standing still. If you have created inertia, maybe the maneuvering thrusters create a backdraft. Maybe they're maneuvering thrusters that push out and push back, so you can stay still in space. Maybe that's what I don't know. But I noticed that. What did you guys? Now let me ask you this. And it still is a question from me, the wormhole scene. To this day, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me because as the wormholes are presented here, they are a bad thing. Whereas, as I'm watching Voyager now, as you may guess, wormholes are a desired thing to get us home, to get them home earlier, sooner.
Keep in mind that was a lot earlier than Voyager, so at the time wormholes hadn't really been studied and harnessed on both ends and things of that nature. So it's probably a thing to be avoided because it was still unknown.
I guess you're right. And we don't hear a lot about. I don't think you hear a lot about wormholes in the original series, do you?
I don't recall it being said in the original series.
Yeah, but
I could be wrong.
Here it's the it's an antimatter imbalance in the warp core that causes the wormhole. So they would have us believe that the ship creates a wormhole as opposed to a wormhole being a natural phenomenon, which I just found interesting.
Yeah, you're right. They do play it that way. So maybe they sort of intimating that the warp engines themselves had enough energy to open up a wormhole. Interesting.
Do you think that there are a couple of moments in the film where Spock says he says he's going to transmit lingua code to V'ger? Do you think that is an early form of the universal translator?
I do.
Because I don't recall them mentioning the universal translator in the original series either. They didn't bother about why do all these aliens speak English in the original series. Is that correct? Am I wrong on that?
Maybe they just assumed that there's a universal translator. You're right about it. They never addressed the topic, but they all look human and they speak English. It's interesting.
Well, now we're going to move into some speculation. And I think, I know that a lot of Trek fans have speculated, yourself included, Craig, that the planet, when Spock does his spacewalk, he sees a machine planet. And a lot of fans have speculated that V'ger possibly entered the Delta Quadrant and came to the Borg planet. And it was the Borg that outfitted V'ger with the whole ship and everything and so on and so forth, and then sent V'ger on its way. What are you guys' take on that?
That's a bit of a stretch for me.
You think so?
I think so.
I think it's possible, because it was just an older version of the Borg that hadn't got all we're gonna go and get everybody and kill them kind of Borg. They just were hanging out on their own planet, and they came across another robot. And so hundreds of years later, the Borg had evolved, and they were building the cube ships and everything. But back then, maybe they weren't.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you a direct quote from the movie that's going to blow your heads open. When before Spock initiates the lingua code, he says this: "Any show of resistance would be futile, Captain."
Yes, I caught that. I caught it. Oh yeah.
Now, come on, guys. I think that pretty much, unless there was a writer on...
I was going to say, I think a young Rick Berman was watching this and went ahead and put that in the databank.
But here's the counter to that, though. If the Borg had outfitted V'ger so that V'ger could complete its programming, that being returned to Earth, then it strikes me that the Borg would have approached Earth way before the 24th century when Picard and crew run into the Borg. Any thoughts there?
not necessarily, because if you think about it, when Picard and crew ran into the Borg, that was all because of Q. Q sent them out to parts unknown. They ran into him, and that essentially put them on the Borg radar.
Right. What I'm saying is that if the Borg sent V'ger on its programmed path home, and I'm sure maybe they would have tried to assimilate V'ger, they would have known about Earth because V'ger's programming initially was to go back to Earth. So I'm saying that between the period of this film and let's say Star Trek 3, the Borg would have been traveling to Earth because they would have learned of Earth through V'ger. Craig, come on, you're a Trek fan.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, if it's hundreds of years have gone by, maybe at that time they didn't care.
The Borg didn't care?
Yeah, they didn't care. They didn't want to assimilate everybody. That's what I was saying earlier. Maybe they didn't care about assimilating people. Hundreds of years later, they had evolved, and then they decided, hey, we need to get everybody into the collective now. But yeah, I can't explain why they forgot about Earth. But maybe they were just too busy with other planets, something like that.
Building computers, the whole nine.
Well, I'm going to say they were too busy destroying Guinan's planet that they didn't deal with Earth. That's why.
That's it.
Got to tie it together. So one last thing, and then we're gonna move into another quick segment here. And Big Sexy, you brought it up, the music. Now, real quick, when I watched this when I watched it on VHS, I don't remember this in the theater, but I recall on VHS, or was it VHS or the network broadcast, before they show the beginning credits, the screen is black and you hear Aaliyah's theme. You know the theme I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I thought there was a problem with my Amazon Prime yesterday when I watched it.
But when
I see a black screen, what the hell is going on here?
But then you hear the music, right? Da, 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 da. I remember that, but when I watched it on Hulu yesterday, that wasn't there. And I was kind of looking forward to that because it kind of brought me into it's like the old school type of theater where, you hear the music while you're taking your seats and stuff like that. But
yeah, I watched on Apple TV earlier today, and I spent about 5 minutes thinking that there was something wrong.
Yeah, they did on Amazon Prime. I'm like, is there a connection somewhere in my video doohickey? But
where did you see it on Apple TV, Craig? Where did they have it in the movies app?
Yeah, they do. They got all the Star Trek. But yeah, you're right. So in the beginning, they play this music with nothing on the screen. And as I said, I just thought there was something wrong. I even reset the Apple TV, and that didn't do anything. So eventually, I just fast forwarded, and eventually, it's like, well, now the movie's starting. Look, there's a Paramount thing. And I just watched it from there. It was very bizarre.
Well, that's funny because I got it off of Hulu, and I was expecting that, and it wasn't there. So I thought, well, did something happen? But speaking of the music, so that's the one thing that this film did do right. They gave us that grand score from Jerry Goldsmith. It's a score that I would put on par with the score, one of my favorite all-time scores, Superman, the movie. And you're right. So in Star Trek The Next Generation, they co-opted that score. And I don't know, now, I think you all were saying that it led to a lot of confusion for you, or it led to, you were kind of had mixed emotions about that. Why did it bother you, or why did you have any feeling towards that at all?
Well, just because it makes you think of the Next Generation when you're watching the motion picture. And if you, so it's like a forward, because in 1979, when you were watching the motion picture, there was no Next Generation, so there was no connection. But now when you watch in 2016, it messes with your mind a little bit because it keeps playing Next Generation music over the movie. That's what it does.
See, for me, I get a little put off when I see the next films, and they have the same. Well, actually, no. Star Trek 2 had James Horner. They had different scores for just about every other film, and there was no continuity. So I kind of like the fact that I've got continuity from the motion picture to the Next Generation. And I do remember some fans, and one of them was a friend of mine, when Star Trek 5 came out, they were pissed that that Shatner decided to use that theme for Star Trek 5, because at that point, Star Trek The Next Generation was in full swing, and I guess it had become popular. So Shatner was like, no, I'm reclaiming that thing from my movie. Of course, we all know how that movie turned out. But but let's round this out. And I'm gonna start with Big Sexy. Big Sexy, you got to tell me what, if anything, did you like about this movie?
I like, and again, looking at it 30 years later, it wasn't as bad as people built it up to be. One thing that Craig mentioned is this really lays the groundwork for everything that comes afterward. We see wormholes. We see just so many different little unintended things that really gave Rick Berman and his people room to run when they did their thing. Also, it really reintroduced that cast back to the general public, because while the show was doing well in syndication, it was still a cult show. The cartoon didn't do as well as a lot of people, myself included, thought it would do, because they even had a lot of the original voices on the cartoon. But the filmation animation style is just so stagnant. I mean, it's almost as bad as the early Marvel. Filmation did the Archie show, the Sabrina Teenage Witch, things of that nature, and it just wasn't that good. And so when you get a chance to get all these cats back on the big screen, and it didn't do as well critically, but it wasn't a bomb in the style of Hudson Hawk or Bonfire of the Vanities.
Wow.
So they saw the problems, corrected them with the second one, and went on their merry little way. But this first one was used. I'm saying I needed to reintroduce a lot of things to it, which is probably why there was a lack of action. But it did meet that goal.
If you remember the original series in '69, they didn't have a lot of money to make those episodes, so a lot of them happen on the ship. And just so maybe somebody wanted to translate that to the movie and keep it with no action. It was disappointing. As a geek, I did enjoy seeing the Klingon vessels in super high detail, lots of panning shots of the Klingon ships, and including the Enterprise as well. That was really gratifying to see that. They did it for too long. I think the shots of Klingon ships were better. They were not short, but they were awesome shots. I still enjoy watching the movie. It is too long, as I said, but I enjoy watching the movie. It's a good story for sure, and that's all I can say about it.
I'm gonna put it like this: I saw the movie without knowing much about Star Trek, hated it, thought it was a waste of time. But I'm gonna say this: if not for Nicholas Meyer, I to this day would not be a Star Trek fan. Because Nicholas Meyer did Star Trek 2, blew my head open. It made me go back and watch all the original series, loved it. And then I saw this film, and despite all the things I've said, I love this movie. The reason I like it, you have to think about why I like Star Trek, period. What are the elements I like about Star Trek? I love the command structure. I'm not a military, I would never sign up to fight anybody's war, but I love that patriotic type of military. It's not a military body, but that military command structure. I love that. When you are going into battle with someone that you were willing to give your life for, that you believe in something that strongly. That's what I love about Starfleet. And in every Trek iteration, that's where I find the most pleasure in watching the captain lead the crew. I love all the protocol. I love all of the administrative stuff. I know this sounds crazy, but when they first come across that cloud, the V'Ger cloud, I love seeing, okay, what is the procedure? What do they do next? What's going to happen now? Why when Kirk calls Decker into his office or into his cabin, why was my phaser order countermanded? I love that, and then Decker says, Kirk says, you did the right thing. You acted in the best interest of the ship. You saved the ship. And Decker says, "Oh, I know I did." And Kirk's like, "I'm not having. Whoa! I'm not having. Stop competing with me, Decker." I love that whole that struggle, the whole chain of command. That is one of the biggest things. I'm watching Voyager now, and whenever Janeway dresses down somebody for getting out of line, I love it. Maybe it's the parent in me. But it's the strategy. It's the chess aspect of, okay, V'ger, we don't know what V'ger is. How are we going to approach this thing? It is 3 minutes from Earth. There was sort of an urgency. They had, initially 72 hours, and they were dealing with the warp core, and we had to see the captain, Scotty, I need warp core, I need warp speed now. And Bones comes up and says, "Jim, you're pushing. Your crew, they know their jobs." And having the context, I'm like, oh, this is all about, look, we are all in this together. I am your commander. I am going to go over that hill with you. I know I'm getting corny, but that whole middle section, that is all gold to me. When Spock says to Kirk, V'ger's a child. And then Kirk, my man Kirk, he's like, "All right, let's clear the bridge." Well, why won't you give us the information? You have to remove those globes from around the planet Earth before I give you the information. No, I must have No, clear the bridge. Nope, that's an order. Clear the bridge. Kirk's not having it. And this was, now that I know who Kirk is, I know that Kirk is that bad, excuse my language, that bad mother bleep who is in charge. He will destroy the ship. He will take a chance. He will take that risk because he has to have it done the way he wants it done. You're not going to dictate to him. You could be an alien presence. You could be ready to destroy the planet. Look, I'm running this show. Clear the bridge. And of course, maybe with the help of screenwriters, his ploys always work, but they're still badass. And Chris Pine, if you're listening, that's why I have a problem with you as Captain Kirk. Because you wouldn't. Okay, that's it. Okay, let me stop. I just don't see Chris Pine jumping bad like that in front of an alien. Okay, but that's for another time. And
of course, that's why Admiral Kirk eventually gets demoted, because he does whatever he wants to get the job done. And of course, Starfleet doesn't like it sometimes.
And do you think Kirk cared? Because he got back in the captain's chair, right?
No, yeah, exactly. He didn't care. He loved it. The thing is, he has a love affair with his ship, and he loves his ship. And I think they explore that a little bit in some of the movies. But he really does love his ship, and he always wants to get back to it.
And see, Picard, I love Picard. I'm going to say roughly Picard is probably my favorite captain. But I'm saying that because you cannot even put Kirk in the same... You can't ask me who's my favorite captain and expect me to put Kirk in that. Kirk stands above and beyond. Kirk is from another time. And that's another thing I like about this movie. I see Kirk... That's Kirk in his id, if you know what I mean. Put aside the original series. This is classic Kirk for the film. Craig, you kind of pointed to it. His id manifested itself in that he was kind of like a jerk to his crew. I didn't necessarily see it that way. I just thought as maybe enough time hadn't been allowed to pass, but that is still the characteristic that makes Kirk that, and I'm going to say it, in 2016, the 21st century, we do not have that masculine put my foot down. This is the way it's done. I know what I'm doing. Follow my lead. You do not see that in today's world nowadays. So I would say that this Kirk in this film, he is a social political statement that no longer exists in our society anymore. And I'm not going to say that's a bad thing. We have Rachel Garrett as a captain. We had Madge Sinclair as a captain. We have Janeway as a captain, who is just almost as badass as Kirk. So don't get me wrong at this.
Well, Janeway ain't having it.
Right.
That's true.
But what I'm saying is that Kirk in this film, what I love about this film, I get that prototype, archetypal cowboy diplomacy captain that got things done. And that is why this movie still works for me. I sat watching this, I'm like, go get him, Kirk. Do your thing. I would have liked to have seen a phaser drawn, okay? But at no point did I ever feel like Kirk was not in command. Listen, Star Trek Beyond, I'm starting to see the grains or the kernels of what I love about Trek. I think I saw a little bit of Chris Pine become the Kirk that I love, the Kirk that I saw in this film and all the other films where he gets even more of a badass. But, yeah, no, he doesn't come close to William Shatner. No one comes close to William Shatner.
I agree with you.
So,
You know, as as a kid growing up, my parents were divorced when I was very young, maybe 9 years old or something. So Kirk, for me, almost became a father figure. I wanted to be Captain Kirk.
nice.
I wanted to basically do what Captain Kirk did, or did in the TV show.
Nice.
But I wanted to mention something about Decker, because Captain Kirk must have known Decker was Matt Decker's son, right? We can assume that it's Matt Decker's son, because no writer would have used the same name. So Matt Decker was the guy who destroyed his ship, trying to kill that in forget what they called it, but it was eating up all the planets. You remember that episode of the original series?
Oh, because you guys kind of hinted to this earlier, and I was distracted a little bit. So you're talking about the Doomsday Machine.
Yeah, so Matt Decker is the captain of the other ship. That's his name, Matt Decker. And he eventually, I think he gets killed, right? Or doesn't he get killed? He flies his ship into
the Doomsday Machine. Yes.
Yeah, he gets killed. So he must have had a son who is obviously Decker from the motion picture. Has to be the same family. So
do you think you don't think it's just a coincidence thing? You think the writers actually pulled that name on purpose? I'm
sure, because why would a writer of Star Trek just ignore the canon like that and just put some random Decker dude on there? I think they don't speak to it in the movie at all, but I think he's probably his son.
I gotta think that if they were, I'm gonna have to disagree respectfully, because I would think that there would be a lot of drama if that were true. That would make it the stakes so much more higher when Kirk takes over the Enterprise from Decker.
Right, but I think Kirk at that time, as he said, was just believed he was the right captain to take the ship, and he didn't think Decker was. And he says he recommended him and everything, so maybe he recommended him because he knew his father and he knew his son coming through the academy. So,
well, that's an interesting. That's interesting.
We're making this up because it wasn't in the canon or anything, but it's got the same last name and everything. So.
Well, that's a very. I never heard that before. I never made that connection before. Final thoughts. Where would you roughly rank the motion picture in the films? Would you put it high? Would you put it low? What's your takeaway on the motion picture?
If I just think about the originals, I would say The Undiscovered Country for number 1, Wrath of Khan is 2, and this would be number 3.
Well, wait. Let's see. You just opened up a batch of worms. You're putting Undiscovered Country ahead of Star Trek 2?
Maybe I shouldn't, but
no. I'm not trying to convince you.
I always thought that The Undiscovered Country was my favorite Star Trek, just from the way that the film, just the visuals and the music and the acting, just everything about it was just a great movie. And I loved Wrath of Khan. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But yeah, if I had to rank them that way, I would.
Well, for me, like I said many times, this movie is my number 3 film. The first one is Star Trek 2. Second one, Star Trek 3. And then this one is the third one. I really think it is a film for Trek fans. I would not have anyone who is not a Trek fan, I would not recommend them watch this and expect anything out of it. But if you are a Trek fan, if you like the Trek lore, you like the Trek mythology, I still think you got to have this DVD or this Blu-ray on your bookcase. And wait, did we just get Big Sexy back?
Looks
I'm
like it.
back. I had a computer issue myself.
So, like Timberlake says, Big Sexy's back. Now wait. Now, Big Sexy, another bad pun coming up. Now, you were taken away from us. Now, I'm going to check the neck. Do you have like a little red orb on your neck now? Are you
No, I'm
collecting data?
I'm all right.
Okay.
I'm still me.
I don't want you wearing that white miniskirt. I don't
If he
want
starts
that.
calling you Mike Unit, you'll know there's a problem.
The carbon-based units of the red shirts. Okay, anyway.
She looked good in that skirt. Can't lie.
Oh,
I'd give it
yeah.
up.
Bald or not, she was fine.
Yeah, we could figure something out.
So we were just wrapping up. Let me ask you, give me your final thoughts on Star Trek the Motion Picture. I don't know if you ranked it in the cinematic Star Trek universe.
I never did rank it because, again, when it first came out, it was really a lot of, what the hell was this? And then Wrath of Khan comes out and just blows it off the planet. So when the rest of them started to come out, and then you started the next generation, it kind of got swept away to the wayside. People really don't talk about it. They just say, yeah, it was there, and just move on. But again, it is there, and it is something that started all of this, and that's good. Now, again, I still think it was made in response to the popularity of Star Wars, but even with that possibility, it was still made and still kicked off a lot of good stuff.
All right, and with that, we're going to beam out of here. But before we do, as always, Craig, tell us where we can find you.
You can probably find me at iBanion. It's probably the easiest on Twitter. Probably the only place these days.
Okay, we're going to have to get that branding up there, Craig.
We're going to have to do that.
Big Sexy, where can we find you?
Twitter, Big Sexy and Sack. Facebook, Mark Wiggins.
And I'm Q Storm. You can find me at realqstorm.com. That's REEL qstorm.com. You can find me on Facebook as Michael Jones, on Twitter at qstorm3476. Please send all of your comments, your feedback to redshirtspodcast@gmail.com. We're gonna start putting up all of these programs on a Libsyn page. We're gonna set that up for you. We already have one episode in the can. We're gonna put that out, but we are gonna go ahead warp speed with this show, and hopefully your feedback will let us know that you want us to keep going. And until the next show, veer her off. I said veer her off. Red Shirts is not endorsed by Paramount Pictures, Viacom, or CBS. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. Star Trek, the Star Trek logo, and all names, pictures, and audio of Star Trek characters are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective trademark and/or copyright holders.